Okay, hi. Firstly, thank you so much, for sparing time, to speak with me today, with us for the Play Knocks. A lot of thanks to you for that. So Pranav, of course, you're the co-founder of LiveWire Sport, and you've done so much. So firstly, I would like to know more about your own self, if you can, elaborate.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Derek, and lovely to meet you. And thank you very much for the invite and to talk a little bit about what I do and what the company does. So, look, it's probably a good opportunity to explain a little bit more about me and how I managed to somehow get here. I'm from the UK, I'm from London, born and brought up in London, into Indian parents. And obviously, we have an expectation of moving into professional, I'll put that in inverted commas, professional industries, but I was never built for that. My love was always sport and my love was always writing. So my career aspirations were always to be a journalist and pursue a career that was very much against the usual kind of Indian professions that we're expected to go into. But fortunately, I had very supportive parents. So I was very lucky that my first job was working at the BBC. So back in 1999, after securing a work experience placement, I was on a postgraduate diploma in journalism course. And as part of that, we went on an industrial placement for 3 weeks. And I had pushed to get to the BBC by pestering someone by ringing up every single day until they relented and gave me 3 weeks. And that was basically the bridge to get me to a full-time role at the BBC. And I was basically working on the website back then. So there was a separate football website that's very different to what the BBC website is now. And it was writing for that website, but also it was very much at the early infancy of what was known back then as the World Wide Web, and basically writing for a very different and new and emerging platform. So no one really knew about it. No one cared about it. But I've always worked in digital. So I've never worked in print, even though I am traditionally a trained print journalist. And basically from 2000 until 2011, I spent 11 and a half years at the BBC. And over that time, I guess as technology advanced, and in particular mobile phones and being able to, 3G basically opening up opportunities for consuming content on the go, we found that live sport was a really huge driver for people on the move and trying to find out about live football scores and how that was, realizing there was a real demand for the content as sport was happening, because traditionally it was always like write a preview, write a report and write a post-match, quotes or something like that. And what we found was the real demand was for the live content, not for the way that it was traditionally being consumed. And suddenly that mushroomed across all sorts of sports, because mainly it was driven around football, but cricket lends itself perfectly to that because it's effectively an all-day sport, and a few other bits and pieces. So yeah, we kind of, back in 2009, BBC Sport was relocating to Salford in Manchester, and I didn't want to move. I was very content in London, so I used it as an opportunity to start something new. Myself and 4 other colleagues who had similar ideas thought, okay, let's see if we can give this a go in the commercial world. So basically creating content on behalf of rights holders or brands to help drive better value for their products. And yeah, so 2011 was when LiveWire Sport launched. Our first client was the Premier League, which not too many companies can say, but a lot of it was serendipitous, that they were moving out of an old contract with another supplier and needed an interim team to help build a website or to create content for a website. And that was effectively, again, the platform to launch into the world of social media, because back then, still very early days, a lot of organizations hadn't adopted it outside of the US, where the NFL and the NBA were leading the way. But they realized it was an opportunity to connect and talk directly to fans. But back then, a lot of organizations, they didn't talk to fans because they were corporate entities, and the Premier League was one of those. So if you're going to talk to fans, you need to do it in a formal tone of voice, or in a tone of voice where you're talking as if you are a personal persona, what that is. So it took quite a long time to get them to the point where we could, I wouldn't say talk freely, but I mean, or communicate freely, but being able to talk to fans in the voice of a fan. But that really changed when the platform numbers really started to grow. So it was Twitter and Facebook back then, and Instagram getting introduced, and realizing that you could suddenly reach a global audience through a whole new medium, and that then opens up sponsorship opportunities, and specifically around localization in terms of speaking to fans in their own languages and building commercial opportunities there. So yeah, that was when we really saw a spike. And then just talking about our other clients, so our three kind of core clients, the Premier League, Wimbledon, and Channel 4, who are a broadcaster in the UK. And we've grown from like 1 or 2 people all the way through to teams of 20 or 30 as we are now. But they've been with us since day one. We also work with the England and Wales Cricket Board, World Rugby, European Athletics, the International Tennis Federation, ATP Tennis TV, the International Paralympic Committee. So we primarily work on the rights holder side, creating content for their social and digital platforms, and basically developing strategies to enable them to achieve their business objectives. So depending on what they're trying to do, whether it's brand awareness, grow audiences, drive first party data, commercial opportunities through branded content, all those sorts of things, and then basically creating, delivering reports to understand what's worked and what hasn't, and how that then kind of affects the strategy, so we can start all over again, but more improved. And yeah, creative and content production. Sorry, apologies, I forgot to say creative and content production basically drive the engine, if you will. That's the engine of what we do. And yeah, that's, I mean, I guess that's a potted history of the company and what we do, but yeah, feel free to ask more about specific areas.
I think getting Premier League as first client must be pretty great for you guys, because it's sort of like launched you in a pretty great manner, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean that was down to, I think, our back then, especially for a big corporate entity like the Premier League, it was all about making sure that they didn't make any mistakes, and making sure that if they're communicating to fans, that we do it in a way that they can trust. So that BBC background gave them the kind of confidence to know that we were not only capable, but making sure that we didn't do it with any kind of mistakes or anything like that. So that safe pair of hands really helped. But what we see now is that the need to be creative, the need to talk to fans in their own voice, and that really is kind of the driving the way that social and digital marketing, and especially in sport, is drive success. It's those sorts of brands who are willing to kind of go into new areas and really experiment. And specifically now we're talking about Gen Z, and the way that platforms like TikTok, they really want to kind of push the boundaries in terms of what a rights holder would traditionally do, because it's not going to work on that platform. So if you want to reach a completely new audience, drive those kind of key metrics and everything else, you're going to have to sort of speak to them in a manner that you haven't done previously. But what you need at the foundation of that is a strategy, is the strategy, exactly how do we do that? What does this, help us achieve from a business perspective? And what are the key deliverables and what are the KPIs that we're measuring all this against? So yeah, I mean, it basically it came down to trust initially, and now it's very much about the creativity and the ability to kind of push organizations into areas that they wouldn't have previously done before.
Absolutely. And talking about that, moving into new areas, new social media platforms coming up, how have you as an organization tried to adapt to different social medias and put content across different social media, because every platform has a different demand?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We have a very specific platform by platform approach. Do not believe in the one size fits all policy. Or the way that you put a video up in 16:9, and then you put the same thing up on all the various different platforms. It doesn't work like that. Optimization is at the heart of what we do, and how people consume that, and the various different customer segments or audiences that will view that. And effectively, if that content isn't optimized, or if it doesn't sell itself in the first few seconds, it's not going to kind of drive the objectives that you want. So a key part of what we do is breaking down what our business or what our clients want to achieve. What is the audience of that platform, what are the strengths and weaknesses, how can we ensure that we deliver those various different messages, and also using things like paid media, so social spend, the ability to create lookalike audiences, calls to action, all those sorts of different calls to action, to actually be able to kind of then be measure what success actually is. So for example, big push at the moment is obviously social is right at the top of that marketing funnel. So it's the widest point of that funnel, but they're all unknown audiences, because the platforms own exactly who they are, where they are, and everything else. You get a snapshot of who they are within the insights, but really what you want is to be able to find out as much about that audience as possible, because the more you know about your audience, the easier it becomes to then sell things like sponsorship, measure value, measure the value of your social channels and everything else, and create better branded content opportunities, sell tickets more efficiently, sell merchandise and things like that. So the more you know about your audience, the better. So what we need to do is drive them from that unknown into the known. Using the social platforms and the kind of tools that they have, there's lots of other third-party platforms that are out there that enable you to do that. But I guess it depends on every single organization and what they're trying to do, because they do vary. But yeah, there's a big push in terms of first-party data in particular for a lot of sports rights holders. The more they understand about their audience, the easier it becomes to monetize.
What have been the past 1.5 years for you like, for your organization? Because I think because of no events, no tournaments, content creation must have taken a hit. So did everything else. So how did you adapt to the situation and overcame all the COVID-19 challenges?
It's a great question. Ironically, we've kind of bucked the COVID-19 trend. So when we went into the pandemic, March 2020, I think we were 36 full-time staff, and now we're close to 70. I think, and that in itself shows you how much is being invested in what we do. And a lot of that was because so many revenue streams closed down like that in an instant. Ticket sales, like physical sponsorship sales, broadcast deals, because there was no live sport. And obviously it affected us. So in the first few months, we had to readjust. And we're actually quite fortunate. In the first few months, we worked alongside the London Marathon events to work on a project called the 2.6 Challenge, which was trying to raise as much money as possible for charities, because the London Marathon is the single biggest sponsorship sort of money money raising event in terms of sponsorship and for charities in the world. I think somewhere in the region about 60 to 70 million pounds, and that effectively fell through the floor as soon as the pandemic hit. So ourselves, so LiveWire Sport, London Marathon Events, an agency called Studio Republic, and a couple of other mass participation organizations, we basically came together to create this campaign in the space of 3 weeks on no budget, rented social media platforms, and we raised 11 million pounds. So I think from the company perspective, that was an incredible achievement, and all pro bono. We didn't receive a penny for it because all that money needed to go to charity. So it actually provided a really, really interesting case study for us about, how we can not only kind of drive revenue for good, but also to understand in situations like that, how people come together and, what role content plays and the ability to inspire. So we got some incredible stories. So it was all about amplifying those stories and reaching audiences and, not only touching hearts, but, creating proper money, people putting their hands in their pockets to spend money, to donate. So that gave us lots of learning opportunities. but we saw with quite a few clients that they had to find new revenue opportunities, and I think branded content was an easy win for quite a few of those organizations. So we had tons and tons of archives, so the ability to play old matches, old races, use the ability to use your sponsors as part of that narrative and create fan engagement stories, because basically everyone was glued to their phones, trying to find out exactly not only about the advances of the COVID-19, but also to actually stay entertained, because there wasn't really much else to do at that time, dependent on what whether you were furloughed or not. But that, I think, for us, we saw that as an opportunity to kind of bring better branded content and using social channels as the distributor, to be able to kind of drive better revenue opportunities for our clients, and then also monetizing platforms as well. So Facebook and YouTube in particular, with longer video views, and especially things like archive. It was just a really easy opportunity to create those to create revenue with not tons of resource. So from our perspective, it gave us quite a few opportunities. And then basically what we saw was at the start of this year, using those learnings alongside live events and the ability to push ticket sales, push broadcast deals and things like that, because basically all those events were coming back. They wanted to be bigger, they wanted to be better. So I think we saw lots of learnings from last year and taking those into this year, and we basically had a crazy summer with not only the Olympics, the Paralympics, the 100, which was huge for us, and Wimbledon, lots and lots of other events for our clients. So it was a crazy summer. So we're just sort of coming to the end and recovering now.
No, yes, definitely. With events restarting, everything, I'm sure everything's going to go back to normal. Do you work a lot with influencers as well, Pranav? Do you engage with a lot of influencers in general?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating area. But I guess the key thing is who those influencers are, who their audiences are, and whether they kind of reflect the kind of values and the tone of the organization that we are working for. So I mean, and it also depends on the platforms that you're trying to prioritize as well. Because I mean, if you're trying to reach younger audiences, yes, you need to look at certain influencers on particular platforms, but ultimately it has to be about whether their channel, their content complements the brand that we're working for. But we work with a number. I mean, a lot of them are presenters as well, who've kind of developed their own sizable followings across platforms. So I mean, it's a bit of a, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a cop-out, but a lot of it depends on who the client is and what they want to achieve, and then we can try and identify the influencers. But it's very much on a kind of case-by-case basis.
Which organization or a football club or anyone's content has impressed you in this past 1.5 years, and you saw it and you were like, they're good?
Well, I mean, I think we in the UK, I think we'll always look to the US as the kind of leader, especially in the kind of social space. So, for me, it's the NBA and the NFL, purely because they just own their own archive and they can go to town with it. The amount of content that they have, and also it's not just match archive. It's the storytelling piece, the ability to tell long form stories. So NFL films in particular, some of the incredible stories that they have such a rich treasure trove of amazing stories that they can basically call upon Will, because they've built that themselves, and their model is very, very different to the way that we do things in Europe. So I'll always look to the US, and I think also the US college scene in particular, purely because it's the youngest, brightest talent, not only with the sport that it's showcasing, but also working behind the channels. And I'll always look for inspiration. I'll always look to the US college scene for inspiration. So it's always, for me, it's always stateside. And the teams themselves, people like the Carolina Panthers, have been really impressive. A lot of the major NFL teams, the 49ers as well, they really think about their fan base and what they're trying to achieve using their social and digital platforms, and how that can not only bring the fans closer to the team, but also harmonize that and complement with the core business objectives. So yeah, I mean, and also for the IPL as well, excuse me. The IPL obviously is slightly different because the broadcast model is different, and what you can and can't use on social is, and also the website is different. But also, yeah, the way that the teams communicate with the fans, the tone of voice is absolutely spot on, and it works perfectly for India. So yeah, lots of very, very good organizations doing some really good work at the moment.
Talking about India, any plans of working with any Indian organization in future?
Well, I'd love to work for the IPL one day. We have worked in India for our specific clients, but not for an Indian client as yet. Hang on a minute, let me wrap my brain. No, we definitely haven't worked for an Indian client. So yes, absolutely, just need the right opportunity.
Great. And Pranav, recently, because everyone has to push out content, it's become a daily need, like every hour, every minute, every second, people have to counter each other, and there are banters. Do you think storytelling in content, have clubs been able to keep that intact, the storytelling, the setting of narrative? Because I think you remember Marcus Rashford, the power of his content really changed things for good. So do you think clubs, organization are able to keep storytelling intact in their content?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's pretty much what we do. Just going back to Marcus Rashford, basically players are their own brands now. That they actually reach more people than the clubs that they play for. You need to look at one, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's not, he's a perfect example of why what he does off the field is just as important, if not more, from a commercial perspective than he does on the field. Now, so a key part of that, what you're saying about storytelling is incredibly important. Now, the platforms themselves, especially the social platforms, want you to stay on their platforms as long as possible to improve those revenue opportunities, but also to kind of gather as much data as possible. So the longer you stay, the more you'll become a walking cash sign. So you've got YouTube wants you to advising a lot of sports rights holders to put 5 to 6 minute match highlights, longer form storytelling at 8 to 10 minutes, so you can start mid rolls as well as pre rolls and things like that. So the platforms themselves want you to upload longer and longer content that's longer, because people will stay and watch on those platforms. That is actual driving direct revenue via those platforms. Now obviously the platforms themselves are earning pretty well out of it, but it's a brilliant opportunity to not only do that, but you've also got the opportunity to complement with your own website, for example, putting things like freemium walls, so the ability to then create first party data capture. So again, you get to understand your audiences better. So there is commercial intent alongside the kind of genuine storytelling piece. So the regular content that's fed into a pipeline, 2 or 3 kind of longer form stories a week, will not only help grow audiences, you're also playing into the algorithm sweet spots. So discoverability becomes easier because you're basically giving the platform what it wants to see, and then the ability to then to find those new audiences, to then create those new subscribers, and basically as that audience grows, the bigger that commercial opportunity arises, because then once you reach a point where your channel reaches a hell of a lot of people, you can then go to a sponsor and say, well, look, we've created this amazing storytelling series that's like 8 to 10 minutes for YouTube. Wouldn't it be great if you stick your name on this? It's not only a brand awareness piece, because we know we can reach X, Y, and Z audience. And they'll watch all the way through to the end, and depending how you want to integrate that sponsored message, you've got lots and lots of opportunities. But ultimately storytelling is at the heart of that. You have to be able to tell really good, compelling stories and to keep people watching. And ultimately, it will be about video driving all of this. So yeah, I think, storytelling is absolutely at the heart of that, and innovation as well. So how do you tell stories differently? And podcasts as well. Podcast is, we're very fortunate. We've won a couple of awards recently for a series that we did with the International Paralympic Committee called The Winning Mindset: Lessons from the Paralympics. And that's all about how we can take lessons from athletes, or disabled athletes who've not only overcome challenges, but have their own coping mechanisms to help able-bodied people to kind of improve their daily lives. And it went out during the pandemic, so there were lots of kind of complementary learnings and processes that people could take into their own lives. So again, it comes down into that sort of storytelling piece, the ability to actually impact people's lives. And I think that's ultimately where I come from a journalism background. But I have to think about the commercial angle for my clients as well. But the ability to tell a story, it goes so far into helping a brand achieve its business objectives.
No, definitely. I mean, I watched that series. One of my friend, Ali Javed, he's one of the Paralympic athlete, placed for GB weightlifting.
Yes.
So great. Apart from that, you spoke about data collection. So, you have to be very careful. Of course, the laws are much stricter in the UK as well.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So how can people, do it in the correct manner? Like they can build more database, but in a correct way.
Yeah, I mean, the GDPR is a very, very it's something that is policed incredibly rigorously in the UK, Europe, and now the US as well. So the way that people's data is used is we are restricted in the way that we process that data, and especially as we're doing we don't do it on behalf of clients, because ultimately we're using a third-party platform to then be able to kind of drive that to a client's kind of database. But yeah, there are so many processes in place to ensure that there are no data breaches. All of that data is collected in a fair and legal manner. But yeah, I mean, that in itself is an incredibly complicated question. So it's probably one that I can't answer particularly well in this circumstance. But yeah, I mean, there are so many kind of processes in place that there are ways that you can do it, and also people have the opportunity to say whether they want to share their data with third-party organizations. So effectively, when you're signing up to a newsletter, there is a checkbox to say, please check this box if you do not want us to share your data with third-party, affiliates and things like that. So, making sure that your processes are, follow regulation and everything else. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we're absolutely, aware of and have to ensure that we get absolutely right.
Great. My last question is, content can also be negative sometimes, and we've seen that with a lot of racism tweets and comments and videos, etc. So do you think people, organizations, sports organizations are dealing with this in the manner that they should be dealing with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the thing is, I think the argument here is that onus comes onto the platforms as opposed to the sports organizations, because the sports organizations have absolutely done their job in supporting the players. We look at the Black Lives Matter movement. I think every single one of our clients was very strong in its messaging in support of the movement. And, Say No to Racism is a huge huge campaign for the Premier League, and that it's such an important inclusive message for our clients. So the fact that they're openly communicating that, using their channels to gain that support, but also to be able to drive the positive sentiment, because I think this is where active community management plays such an important role. So, you post something and you reward the positivity, and then you also the ability to answer negativity, but with the reasoning about why that person is wrong or why that messaging is clear from the organization that you're communicating for. So, we have our own ways of dealing with that, but ultimately I think that responsibility, it falls to the platforms themselves, which is where I think most of the kind of the controversy has been around, because of the fact that you can be completely anonymous or behind an email address, but the identity of those people is hidden. So where is that protection for people who are under fire, or who have been abused? So I think from our perspective, we can only do so much, and a lot of that is about awareness, positivity, and spreading the message far and wide on behalf of your clients. Ultimately, you're never gonna stop the negativity, because it's always going to exist, and especially on social platforms. But we can play our part in ensuring that positivity is rewarded.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pranav. I'll just go and stop the recording and come back. Just give me 1 second.
Sure, no worries.